Yo, what up, Street Talks? There, Kim. All right, so the thought. This one is about Karl Popper's notion of falsification. So I think it's one of the best philosophical tools we get to our mental toolkit. So this is the basic gist. So, once upon a time, the fact was only white swans existed and black swans didn't exist. Why? Because for hundreds, if not thousands of years, Europeans only saw and witnessed white swans. So let's say there's 1 million sightings of white swans, and therefore we could say with very high certainty that only white swans exist, right? So back then, that was kind of a fact. All swans are white, and the thought of a different type of swan existing was, a non-concept, or, didn't exist. However, fast forward a bit, I think it was in Australia or somewhere, that finally one day, some scientist somewhere sees a black swan. Maybe he took a photo with his iPhone or something, I'm just kidding. But I don't know how he had proof, but he spotted a black swan, and then he said, I have witnessed a black swan and have definitive proof that black swans exist. Now, it was interesting because let's say, they saw a trillion white swans or 10 trillion white swans for 10,000 years. Then the fact would be only white swans exist, or that's what people would say. And until somebody discovered a black swan or a pink swan or a purple swan, the thought is nothing else but white swans could exist. Now, this is the problem is, and then even Nassim Taleb talks about the Lucretius problem, or the Lucretius fallacy. I think Lucretius in his epic poem, like, Of Natural Things or something, he says something like, the fool thinks that the tallest mountain in the world is the tallest mountain he himself has climbed. Now, similarly speaking, let's say once upon a time, I'm Korean, right? Now I've lived in Korea for my whole life, all my ancestors were Korean, and no one has ever left Korea. And then you assume that the whole world is Korean because that's all you see. And then one day you see like a Caucasian man or an African man or whatever it may be, and it would totally blow your mind, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I didn't know they existed, right? And so the notion of falsification is, from a philosophy of science perspective, the purpose of science, or if science were to be truly rigorous, science could only be 100% certain in falsifying things or positing or proving things to be false rather than proving things to be true. Because there's always going to be exceptions to the norm. So for example, once upon a time, they didn't think it was possible for man to break the 4-minute mile, and now you get like high schoolers doing it. Or once upon a time, it was considered impossible that someone could deadlift over 1,000 pounds, and now you got like that 25-year-old guy who could break it, and I think Eddie Hall deadlifted 500 kilos. So certainly the problems that we humans make is we try to predict the future based on the past, but once upon a time, there's obviously people who, kind of predicted the internet and the rudimentary concept, but surely it was impossible to know that things like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google Maps, Oculus Rift, and stuff like that as we know it would exist today. Even now, honestly, every time I jump into an Uber, I use Google Maps, Google Street View, it still blows my mind. Even when I use Google Maps 3D and it automatically turns the buildings into 3D, that still blows my mind. To me, it's like, it truly is like magic. Or, can you imagine telling a French king, 1,000 years ago, or I don't know, 700, 300 years ago, I don't really know history that good, that you could have the sum of all human knowledge that fits in a small little tablet that fits in your front pocket. They would have thought you're crazy, right? So humans are just not good. We're really not good at like predicting what doesn't exist yet. And so the basic notion I want you to think about in falsification is always be very, very skeptical of things. Now, you know, it's funny, like I think it was either someone asked this to Nassim Taleb or Karl Popper, is like, but you know, Mr. Popper, can't you falsify falsification? And then sometimes the best way to deal with critics is just to walk away. Like there are sometimes people who are just trying to troll you. There's not really going to be any good answers to some people's, you know, kind of ridiculous questions. But certainly one still needs some sort of thing to latch onto in order to live in a proper, decent place. So the way I've personally taken it is I don't believe any ultimate facts or knowledge exists. Maybe only really in physics and math, and if you want to get super technical, even like math and physics in other, you know, dimensions or whatever, traditional notions of like classic Newtonian physics don't really play out. So I mean that's just getting super theoretical, but for the most part, you know, if you think about physics first principles, anything is possible within the realm of physics, but plausibility or possibility or probability, these are other things. So for example, it is possible that you could make $100 trillion company in theory, right? And who knows, maybe 1,000 years from now we'll see like a trillion dollar company, who knows? But whether that's probable in life or probable in our lifetime, you know, probably not, right? So it's really tricky, is that one kind of still needs to retain one's childlike naivete to believe in the possibility of things. And that's where, you know, kind of being a little bit crazy or to be a dreamer is kind of a good thing, because certainly it's like the genius of Steve Jobs, Kanye, Elon Musk, and these other big visionaries and thinkers who are considered crazy by the masses are the ones who push the needle and progress of society forward. And we kind of need more crazy, aberrant people in society. And so, you know, for myself, you know, you think about like Sergey Page and Sergey and Larry. The reason why they're able to be so imaginative and creative and revolutionary was because, you know, my theory is because they went to a Montessori school and they weren't indoctrinated with the traditional, like, you know, black and white kind of simple binary thinking, is that they're allowed to kind of play. And even the way they structured Google, or they came up with notions of Google, or they cross-pollinated notions of academia, right? Because I think, you know, I forget whose parents were both like professors or something like that. And so it kind of dealt with the citation, you know, ranking algorithm, which essentially makes Google what it is today. And so certainly I think the future will be inherited by those who are the most brave, the most audacious, and considered the most crazy or insane. And you know, we remember the Steve Jobs quote, which comes from the Whole Earth catalog, stay hungry, stay foolish. Once you're fat and plump and you've lost the vigor and the hunger, you might stop innovating. Whereas if you still have that foolishness, because certainly, what is a fool? A fool is somebody who's considered by the masses to be, you know, to believe in things which many people consider improbable. But once again, everyone thought Elon was crazy. Everyone thought that Elon Musk was crazy until he did the impossible. He made Tesla, he made the Model 3, and now he's making Cybertruck and all this other crazy shit. So, you know, if Elon wasn't so crazy, he couldn't have done what he wanted to do. And, you know, Steve Jobs, his genius was, he was just such a stubborn person, and he was kind of like a man baby. He'd be crying all the time and demanding exactly what he wanted. He would never compromise. And so certainly I think maybe what makes a great individual or a great innovator entrepreneur is somebody who's not willing to compromise his or her own